So far, we've only used anonymous functions as the parameter to the event handlers. We can create a named function and use that instead of an anonymous function. We'll create a function called named_handler within our page. It will do the same thing as our anonymous function, it will just be named. Of course, it's not a very descriptive name, but it will have to do. A named_handler function can be removed with the auth method without removing all other handler functions. Named functions can be centralized in a namespace object for centralized access throughout a web application. If we need to change a handler function, even at runtime, the changes will have global impact, making all event handlers be consistent. Here's the code as we left it in the last section. We'll add the named_handler function to it. As stated, this function performs the same tasks as our anonymous event handler function. The only difference is the string named_handler is added as the prefix to the event type. Now that we have the function defined, let's use it to attach an additional event click handler. This syntax is much cleaner than using an embedded anonymous function. All of our named event handlers could reside in a single library and be called in this manner. Notice how we've attached the named_handler function to the click and double click events, but not the mouse down event. We're also going to remove the auth method from the middle of the chain. Now that we're no longer removing event handlers from the middle of the chain, let's see this in Firefox. When we click the header of the work area, we see that we get a standard mouse down message and the named handler click message. Remember, we stopped propagation in the named handler function, so no additional click handlers should be processed. The double click also shows the expected message from the named handler function. We can also remove the named handler function with the auth method by passing the function as a parameter. jQuery will look for that event handler function attached for the specified event and remove just that handler function and leave all other handlers in place. In this case, we're removing the named handler function just for the click event. It should still be attached for the double click event. Let's take a look. When we click on the elements, we see the standard mouse down and click event messages. When we double click, we see the named handler double click event message. As mentioned earlier, the auth method is most often used at the beginning of a chain of event handlers to make sure that only the handlers that are desired are present. There's nothing to prevent subsequent processing to use the auth method to target specific handlers for removal in response to some business logic need. Event handlers are executed in the same order they are attached. However, it is possible that some future code may alter the order that handlers are attached. If you require some processing to occur in the very first event handler that executes, it's best to make sure that process was completed in any subsequent event handlers that you write. For example, validation logic may be included in a click event handler for a submit button. If some fields don't pass the validation checks, the click event gets canceled so the form won't be submitted. Some future coder may attach a click event handler for the submit button that sends a system notification upon click. Perhaps some monitoring system needs to be notified of the form submission. If this event handler gets attached prior to the validation process, the notification would occur even though the form wasn't submitted due to a failed validation result. This may seem like a silly example, but this kind of code breakage happens in projects quite often. When a simple web page is being used, attaching event handlers like we're doing is just fine. When creating an extensive web application that loads content dynamically via AJAX, it becomes essential that all event handlers are attached from a single library. This allows future programmers to see what has already been attached to the elements so they can include additional event handlers in the proper sequence. We also gain the benefit of using named functions instead of anonymous functions.